This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome every one of you that is here in the congregation and those of you that are coming in through our YouTube channel and the Facebook and other media outlets that are here. The Churn radio station, and Adonai is bringing us to the whole world with his gospel. Today's parasha is Lech Lecha. Say with me, Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha. In fact, the actual word is not just Lech Lecha, but it's Lech Lecha me'artzecha. Say with me, me'artzecha. You know, one thing I've realized that when we do the parasha, each parasha has a title. But what I've been noticing is that most of the time we just put Lech Lecha. But as I meditate on even the title, today's title is not just Lech Lecha, it's Lech Lecha me'artzecha. And we're going to see what that means. Lech Lecha, of course, means go forth for yourself, or you yourself, tú solo. Actually, in Spanish, we have an old Spanish saying that says, aléjate, or cut down to léjate, means get out of here, go on. I've been trying to find that in the Spanish dictionaries, and I can't find it. We're thinking that it might come from lejos, which means far away, but I couldn't find the connection. But again, a lot of the Spanish is from the Sephardic, from the Ladino, so there might even be a Ladino connection there. Léjate, go you yourself. Te is you yourself. Léjate is go yourself. Ándale. So our study is Lech Lecha me'artzecha. It's Breshit, Genesis 12, verse 1 to chapter 17. And as you see, it has 8 teachings in it. What I've done every week is I've gotten the parsha and I've put it in outline form. I have the whole Torah outlined. And today's the 3rd parsha of the year, and it's outlined into 8 teachings. Now, we could actually spend the whole day on any one of these 8 teachings, 8 subject points, but we're just going to get a little bit of each. Now, we said that Genesis chapter 1 to chapter 11 is the section on beginnings. The first 2 parashot, Parsha Breshit and Parsha Noach, those 2 parashot open us to everything that's going to happen. They're the book of beginnings. They're the parashot of beginnings. And every person in the whole world is found in these 2 parashot. Every person in the whole world, regardless of color, creed, whatever they are, whoever they are, wherever they're from, could trace their ancestry through the 70 nations that were split at the tower, through the 3 sons of Noah, through Noah, all the way up to Adam. And there are 10 generations from Adam to Noah. There are 10 generations from Shem to Avram. And last week, Parsha ends with Terah. In last week's Parsha, in fact, let's go ahead and read last week's Parsha, the end. In chapter 11, verse 27, it's the Toldot of Torah, Terah. Terah's Toldot. Now, a Toldot, we've already been seeing, is a generations of, or the story of. And it says there, Terah became the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran became the father of Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in his native land, Ur of the Chaldees. Avram and Nahor both married. Abraham's wife was called Sarai. Nahor's wife was called Milcah, the daughter of Haran, father of Milcah and Ishka. Sarah was barren and having no child. And so over here we see the Toldot, the generations, the story of Terah. And it is this that opens us up. This is the end of the old world. This is the end of everything from Adam to the nations. At the Tower of Babel, the nations were formed. Chapter 10 and 11 talk about the nations, the Goyim. This is the formation of Goyim. This is where all the nations of the world comes from. Remember, Adonai, through the Tower of Babel, decided that the world should not be echad. He decided that the world should be separate, set apart, and divided into nations, tribes, and languages. The division of the world into nations, tribes, and languages was a discipline by Adonai, so that the world would not be a united nations. So that the world would not be a united nations. And he was setting this up because of what he's going to do in today's parashot. In fact, up to this time, from Adam to Nimrod, it was just one people, one language. Everybody was united. Yeah, there was violence and people were hating each other, and Adonai destroyed it with a flood. There was Hamas, it says, violence all over. There was Hamas. And Adonai divided the world into tribes, languages, into the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Adonai was already separating in the first generations from Adam to Noah, separating the holy line, the messianic line. Adonai was already separating that messianic line. And he further separates it into Shem and his line. But even in Shem's line, there was nations that came about. And Terah was part of one of the nations. They were part of the city of Ur, who later on would become the Chaldeans, the magicians, the sorcerers. This is in the land of what is called Assyria. The Sumerian culture lived there at the time. Today it is Iran, Iraq, the Shinar area, the Mesopotamia between the two rivers. This is where Abraham lived. This is where Terah was. He was there. In fact, in Joshua 24:2, as you see there, thus saith Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, your fathers dwelt of old time beyond the river, even Terah, the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, and they served other gods. In Joshua 24, Joshua is telling us who the family of Abraham was and where they came from. Abraham wasn't Jewish. Abraham wasn't a Hebrew. Abraham was a Sumerian, an Assyrian. He was a Gentile. He was part of a goy, a nation. Adonai looked over the whole world at the time. And think of it, between Nimrod and Terah, idolatry, other gods formed. Before Nimrod, there was no other gods. In fact, even in the line of Cain, we don't see idol worship. We don't see other gods. It is Nimrod and his descendants. Nimrod is the first potentate, the first one world leader. He's the first empire builder, the first potentate. And he was a murderer. He was a bad person. That's why all those people that are trying to form a one world government, trying to bring all this false unity in a one world system, the New World Order, all that comes from Nimrod. And it was Adonai's way to break it up. And he broke it up. And the reason he broke it up is that from one of those nations, from the line of Shem, through Terah, through one of Terah's sons, they were idol worshipers. Terah was an idol worshiper. Now think of it. I'm 70 years old. Abraham, when he was called, is just 5 years older than 5 years from now. I could say Abraham was called when my age. Here is a map of where Ur is, and Lech Lecha. From Ur, he went to Haran, to Shem, to Bethel, to Hebron, and to Beersheba. You could see that he lived in Ur beyond the river. On the other side of the river, it says here, he lived over there, Ayah. And he goes to Haran at the top and then down the line to Canaan. This is what's called the Fertile Crescent. And the reason they can't go across is that there's desert and there's volcanic rock under the sand, and there's caravans can't go across. They have to go over and around. All the armies, everybody went from Babylon, from Assyria, from all these areas, all the way around to come down to Canaan and Egypt. When he gets to the land of Canaan, of course, he goes through Damascus, through Shem, through Bethel, Hebron. One of the places that he stops between Damascus and Shem is the city of what is called today Dan, the city of Dan. And today there is a tell, there's a mound, and we've worked in that gate, the gate that comes into the city of Dan, the northern gate. Abraham actually passed through the gate. And it's interesting because that gate is an adobe gate. The walls were adobe. And it's been preserved, and we worked there in that gate and helped dig it up. And so it's important to see that here in Israel today, you can still see remnants of where Abraham was. Now, today's teaching is of vital importance. It's probably one of the most important teachings that a new believer needs to know. That someone who even comes from Christian faith into studying Torah, and definitely from someone that comes from rabbinic faith and wants to study Torah. Because remember, those that come from Christian faith and those that come from rabbinic faith need to develop a new paradigm. Because definitely the rabbinic faith is not a biblical paradigm. the Christian faith is not a biblical paradigm. Now, both of them have roots into biblical faith and doctrine, but they're hybrids, and they've been hybrided. They've been added and taken away with, from the Torah. But today's teaching is of vital importance because it gives us the foundations of Hebraic faith and doctrine. It's the basis of what our identity is. Our identity should be three things: Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic. Every one of us should follow a Mosaic lifestyle, a Messianic lifestyle, and an Apostolic lifestyle. Now, most Messianic Jewish congregations, there's a lot of congregations that call themselves, we're a Messianic Jewish congregation. What most Messianic Jewish congregations are is they're actually following rabbinic ways, and some of them come from Reformed or conservative, maybe a few from Orthodox Judaism, and they become believers in Yeshua. Many of them became believers through the Christian church, and then now decided that because I'm Jewish, I'll go to a Messianic congregation, and they get their rabbinic ideas and they bring them in. Many Christians do the same thing, get our Jewish ideas, our Christian ideas, as Catholics, as Protestants, bring them in. But I believe we need to do something else. I believe we need to do a break. There has to be a break. And this comes with the call. Lech lecha me'artzecha. Lech lecha me'artzecha. Arise and go for yourself from your land. From your land. Me'artzecha. The word me'artzecha, me, from. Artzecha, your, ha at the end. And eretz. Haaretz, the land. Avram, go. Avram, exalted father, go. Arise, párate, ándale pronto y con buen modo. Arise, get up, go. Lech lecha, go for yourself. From your land, Léjate, we would say in Spanish. Go for yourself. From your land. From the land of your birth, the land of your citizenship. Salte de tu tierra. Leave your land. Not go to, but go from. Now, if I were to, in the military or at home, family, and tell my son, I want you to go to the store. I want you to go to Santa Fe. I want you to do this, do this, do this. We always say, I want you to go to. Notice that we never say, I want you to go from my house over there. It's almost like from my house is implied. I don't tell my son, go from my house to Santa Fe. No, it's implied. Go from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. No, that's implied. But for some reason, Adonai did not imply it. He actually said it. Go for yourself. Avram, exalted father. Go from your land. There had to be a sharp cutting off. Let go, separate. Separate from, whether it's not only a physical separation, but a mental separation. Because remember, once Abraham started walking, once he started walking, everything back there was going to be gone, never to return. Hasatan, like with all of us, tries to put in some of our past in there. But part of our repentance, part of our getting away from, is getting away not only physically, but getting away spiritually, getting away mentally from our past. Doing everything we can to separate from the past. You could take the boy out of Egypt, but can you take Egypt out of the boy? In this case, you could take Abraham out of Ur, but can you take Ur out of Abraham? And that's the key to repentance. That's the key to leaving the past. And Abraham has a choice. He has a call. He's been called. It's interesting that he was called in Ur of the Chaldees. But then from Ur of the Chaldees, he goes to Haran, but he slips up. He stays in Haran until his father Terah dies. Once his father Terah dies, then he continues. That was one of the problems that we have with Abraham. He didn't want to leave his father. Arise, go for yourself, go from your land, separate yourself. And from your kindred, and from your father's house. This would involve all the primos, all the cousins. The father's house would involve the whole household, everybody else. The uncles, the nephews, everybody separate. Adonai wants a complete separation. He doesn't want any residual from the past on Abraham's life. He doesn't want anything that would distract him, anything that would take away from the call. There is a call in Abraham's life. There is a call for eternity with eternal consequences. That's why this is the most important, one of the most important chapters. It's a new leaf. The scriptures are actually divided in two. Genesis 1 to the end of chapter 11 is one section. That's the beginnings. With Abraham, with this call, all of a sudden, everything from Genesis 12 to end of Revelation is one section. This is where the foundations of a faith lifestyle come from. We see the foundations in Abraham. Unto a land that I will show you. Leave from your land, your people, your kindred. Déjalos solos, ándale, vete. Para una tierra que yo te voy a enseñar. For a land that I'm going to show you. Hebrews 11:8 says, it was by faith that Abraham obeyed the call to set out for a country that was the inheritance given to him and his descendants. That's you all here. But I'm not Jewish. I'm not talking about Jewish. I'm talking about being a descendant. This is why this teaching is of value and of vital importance. And that he set out without knowing where he was going. Adonai told Abraham, gas up your RV, get it ready, and take off. He wasn't given a destination. Adonai, when he called every one of us, did not give us a destination. When we're born, we're not given the date of our death, a destination. It's a life of faith that we have to live. And Adonai called, get up, leave your citizenship behind. I'm going to take you to a land. I'm going to show you a land. Which means you just take off. Now, he couldn't take off south, by the way. South is the Persian Gulf. He needed a boat for that. And so he takes off north. And Adonai showed him the way, all the way. He get to Iran, and like I said, he stopped there. Terah died in Haran. But then there's a second call, and Adonai calls him again, and he takes off again. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. You are to be a blessing. Adonai said to Avram, leave your land, leave your citizens, leave your nation. Leave your nation, and I will make you a great nation. Leave your goy. The word goy means a nation. Goyim means the nations. And there was many nations there, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, all kinds of nations in Mesopotamia, and all kinds of other nations all around, the Egyptians and others that had wandered into different areas from after the flood and the Tower of Babel incident. So he was to leave the Gentile nations to become a goy gadol, a great nation, who later on in the time of the Exodus, Adonai calls them a chosen nation, a royal priesthood, a holy people. But I'm going to make you a goy gadol. Abraham and his seed and his descendants, because remember, Abraham, and listen closely, Abraham and his seed, singular, and his descendants, plural, are to become a goy gadol. And that includes every one of you that is here, that has been baptized into Yeshua, whether you have Jewish or non-Jewish blood, because it's more than blood. This is what the Abrahamic covenant is all about. Notice what it says. Go, Avram, leave your country, your family, your father's house for a land, haaretz, leave your land for a land, and I will make you a great nation, goy gadol, that's a seed, those are descendants, and I will bless you. The Abrahamic covenant, and covenants, by the way, because there's not only one, there's many Abrahamic covenants, and they all fit into one called the Abrahamic covenant, is about a land, a seed, and a blessing. Now, the most important thing we need to learn is that this covenant is unconditional. It's an unconditional covenant. It's a promise. Unconditional promise. In other words, it's unqualified. There's no qualifications. He doesn't need to do this, and this. He already did it. He left. He followed by faith. He believed the word of Elohim, and that was considered as righteousness. It's unilateral. It's not bilateral. It's a unilateral covenant. In other words, it only depends on one. A bilateral covenant depends on both parties, the party of first part, the party of second part. A unilateral covenant depends only on one part. And in this case, it depends only on Elohim, who called Abraham. It's a literal covenant. It's grammatical. It's historical. And it's an eternal covenant. It's always and forever. Olam cha olam. The Abrahamic covenant, the promises of a land, seed, and the blessing, unconditional, literal, and eternal. This is so important that every young believer knows this. Here's a chart that I just made up on it. The land, seed, and the blessing is further, the land is further stipulated in what we call the Israel covenant. The Israel covenant, Deuteronomy 30. The seed is further stipulated in the Davidic covenant, 2 Samuel 7. And the blessing is further stipulated in the new covenant, Jeremiah 31:31. And of course, there's other scriptures to this. This is the first gospel. Notice what Genesis 12:3 says. Genesis 12:3. And I will bless them that bless you, and him that curses you, I will curse. This is the first gospel. And we're going to see it. I will bless those that bless you, those that support you, Abraham, and your seed, and your seed. Now remember, Abraham and his seed, you all. Those that support you, those that bless you, those that bend the knee to you, which is what the word barach means here. I will bless. How many want to be blessed? Bless the seed of Abraham, and you will be blessed. Now notice what I said and what I didn't say. I said, bless the seed of Abraham, and you will be blessed. Notice what I didn't say. I did not say, bless the Jewish people, and you will be blessed. And that's important. And him that curses you, the word curse in English is found in both places. But if you read this in Hebrew, which is interesting because as I read the English, preparing for the study, and then read it in Hebrew, you notice things. Wait a second. There's two different Hebrew words here. And him that curses you, Abraham, and your seed, him that curses you, I will curse. Well, that first word curse, kalal, say with me, kalal, means to put down, to make little of, to slight someone. So anyone who makes little of Abraham and his seed, anyone who slices them, anyone who puts them down, Adonai is going to arad. And arad is the word to curse, to destroy, to come against, to take away from. So let me tell you, a little slap on Abraham and his seed, or a little push, will bring the judgment of Adonai heavy on those that do that. It's not just, I will slap those that slap you. I will punch those that punch you. It's those that push you with a finger, I'm going to get, and they're going to lose it. That's how jealous Adonai is for his people. Abraham and his seed. Abraham and who? his seed. And it's important right now to understand that we're talking about Abraham and his seed. And then here comes the gospel. Here comes the gospel. And in you, all the mishpocha, say mishpocha, of the earth, of the Adamah, will be blessed. Every family on earth, every family on earth, every tribe, every nation can only receive blessings through Abraham and his seed. They can't be blessed by themselves. Adonai will never bless anybody by themselves. In fact, Adonai will not even bless Israel or any of the tribes or even the tribe of Judah, the Jews, by themselves. It's only through Abraham and through the seed of Abraham that Adonai will bless Kol Goyim, all the nations, and the Jewish people today. Only through Abraham and his seed. Remember, I keep saying Abraham and his seed, Abraham and his seed. Not everyone who is a descendant of Abraham. Definitely, it doesn't apply to Ishmael. Definitely, it doesn't apply to the sons of Lot and their families, the nephew of Abraham. Definitely, it doesn't apply to anyone else, Esau, or the sons of Esau, or other sons of Abraham that he had through Keturah, or anybody else. It's through Abraham and his seed, his seed. By the way, this covenant blessing is about the gospel. In Genesis 18:18, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed by him. Genesis 22:18, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Genesis 26:4, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Genesis 28:14, and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Not only was this given to Abraham, but it was reiterated here in these verses to Isaac and Yaakov. The seed of Abraham, Isaac, the seed of Isaac, Yaakov, the seed of Isaac, and the seed, and the seed, and the seed, and the seed, and the seed. Go with me to Galatians 3:8. Watch what Galatians 3:8 says. And the scripture foreseeing, in other words, Torah, they're talking about Torah, not talking about what is called the New Testament today. Talking about Torah, the scripture, foresaw. Well, it wasn't the scriptures that foresaw. It was Yahweh. It was the word of Yahweh, who is the living Torah. So I could actually say Yeshua. The scripture foreseeing that Elohim would justify the Gentiles, justify Goyim, justify the nations through faith, preached the gospel in the beginning to Abraham, saying, in you all the nations shall be blessed. Look at that. Elohim preached the gospel to Abraham in the beginning. Here, the beginning of Torah, Breshit. Paul knows this clearly. Paul was a student of Gamaliel. foreseeing that Adonai was going to justify the nations, the Gentiles. That includes every person who considers themselves part of the nations, part of the Gentiles. Oh, I'm Irish. Oh, I'm Spaniard. Oh, I'm Chinese. Oh, I'm from Africa. Oh, I'm from Russia. Oh, I'm from this. I'm from that. Adonai promised to justify every nation, Kol Goyim, to Abraham, not through the Catholic Church or the Christian Church, the Baptists. No, to Abraham, our father. When he said, in you shall all nations be blessed. When Adonai said that, that's the gospel. And how did he say it to Abraham? Through Yeshua. Yeshua spoke to Abraham. And Yeshua taught these to Abraham in his pre-incarnate form. Remember, Yeshua met with Abraham several times. He met with Abraham several times and taught him about all kinds of different things. You say, wait a second. Yeshua lived 2,000 years after Abraham. The Jews had the same problem in Yeshua's day. They told Yeshua, wait a second, Yeshua, you're not even 50 years old. How could you have seen Abraham? And Yeshua said, before Abraham was, ego eimi. He uses that term that comes out in the Greek New Testament as ego eimi. But the term ego eimi is the word Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. I am. Before Abraham was, I am. Before Abraham was, Yahweh. Pointing to himself. Yeshua said, Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. Can you imagine that? Abraham sees the day of Yeshua. Abraham sees Yeshua's day. He rejoiced. He was glad when he saw Yeshua's day. Abraham probably saw by faith and by the pre-incarnate Yeshua his birth, his death, his resurrection, his ascension, his glory. Go with me to Galatians 3:16. Now the promises were addressed to Abraham and to his seed. Notice the words were not and to his descendants in the plural, but in the singular, and to your seed, which means Messiah. Look at that. This is an unveiling of a mystery that was unknown from that time till Paul writes to the Galatians. Because grammatically, the term and to your seed, when Adonai says and to your seed, to your seed, to your seed, in Torah it's in the singular. Yes, many times he says your seed will be as the stars of heaven. But they will come from one of those stars. As the sand of the seashore, but they will come from one sand. The promises were addressed to Abraham and to his seed. Notice, Paul says, the words were not to his descendants in the plural, but in the singular, to your seed, which means Messiah. So look at this. Every promise in Lech Lecha of a land, the seed, and the blessing, it's all about Yeshua. It's about Yeshua. It's about the identity of Yeshua. The land of Israel does not belong to Israel. It belongs to Yeshua. The land of Israel definitely does not belong to the United Nations. It doesn't belong to the PLO. It doesn't belong to America. It belongs to Adonai and to his seed, which is Messiah. Yeshua owns Israel. Not the Jews. Yeshua. Not the Christians. When the Crusaders came in, they came into Yeshua's land, not to their land. They conquered Yeshua's land, and they raised havoc there. The Muslims who took over from the Crusaders took it as theirs. It's not your land. It's Yeshua's land. It belongs to Messiah, and it belongs to Messiah and his seed. And who is his seed? In fact, let's go back there to Galatians. Galatians chapter 3. And watch what it actually says. Galatians 3. Verse 27. All baptized. Wait a second, verse 25. And now that the time has come, we are no longer under the guardian by faith. And you, all of you, are B'nai Elohim. Now remember, he's talking to the Galatians. The Galatians are Goyim. The Galatians are part of the Gentiles. There's several nations in Turkey at the time. Modern Turkey, the Galatians. By the way, they became the Galicians, and they went north, and after that they went to Spain. All baptized into Messiah. How many of you have been baptized into Messiah? You are all clothed yourself in Messiah, and there are no more distinctions between Jew and Greek. No more distinction between Jew and Greek. By the way, some people are Jews and some people are Greeks. That's okay. Do we have any Greeks over here? We have a number of Jews here. Slave and free. How many of you are slaves? We're supposed to be free, but I don't want to go into political rant right now. Male and female. How many are male? How many are female? By the way, there are no its. There are no neutrals. I just read someplace that some stores are, was it Costco or one of those stores, are saying you can't say, excuse me, ma'am, or excuse me, sir. You have to use gender neutral language. So we say, excuse me, it? I don't know. There are no more distinctions between Jew and Greek, slave and free, male and female, but all are echad, one in Messiah Yeshua. By belonging to Messiah, look at this, by belonging to Messiah, how many belong to Messiah? You are the posterity, the seed of Abraham, the heirs he was promised. Now, that right there should stop us from so much misunderstanding from the rabbinic Jewish and from the Gentile Christian understanding of the identity of a believer. What this says, if you've been baptized in the name of Messiah, under his name, under his authority, you've clothed yourself with Messiah. Adonai does not look at us as you're Jewish and you're Greek, you're male or you're female, you're rich or you're poor, you're handsome or you're funny looking. He doesn't even, Adonai doesn't see me as funny looking. Because I've been baptized into Messiah, I am an inheritor of Abraham. And I am the seed of Abraham. Whether I'm Jewish or Gentile, whether I'm 23% Jewish and 30% Native American, or, whatever the percentages your DNA gives you, that doesn't matter. Percentages don't matter no more. What matters is, are you baptized in the Messiah and are you clothed in Messiah? The baptism changes us inside, and our clothing is an outward thing. By the way, we should be outwardly also of Messiah. So people could say, by what we eat, by how we're dressed, outwardly, that there is something inside that is different. By the way, it can't just be outside, it has to be inside. It can't be inside, it has to be outside. Both are together. The promise is at Shechem, Yahweh appeared to Abraham and said, I give this country, this land, to your seed. And there Abraham built an altar to Yahweh who appeared to him. So the promise of Genesis 12:3 and 12:7 applied to Abraham and his seed, which is Messiah, and those that are brought forth as new creatures in Messiah through baptism. And that is part of that, what I call the olive tree mystery, the olive tree prophecy. And we've gone into that a lot of times. And then we go to chapter 14, 18 to 20. I'm going to talk a little bit of Melchizedek here. Melchizedek, the righteous king, the king of Salem, which is Shalom, which is the root of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim means foundation of peace. The foundation of Salem, peace. Salem means peace. Yerushalayim. And Melchizedek, the righteous king, who was the king of Salem, the king of Jerusalem. This is before David and before everybody else. Brought bread and wine. Interesting that he brings bread and wine. Bread and wine. Today, people mostly use wine as a toast. Every time somebody does a toast, it goes back to the ancient ritual. Every time someone decides to say, let's give a toast or let's do this, and they bring wine, it goes back way to ancient Middle Eastern hospitality, which Melchizedek, now some people say that Melchizedek was Shem, which he could be because Shem lived many years. We don't know who the righteous king, but he was the king of Jerusalem. Brings bread and wine, which is an act of hospitality. And they eat a piece of bread, and they add salt to the bread. Salt is a symbol of prosperity, a symbol of continuity, a symbol of preservation. and they put a little salt on the bread, and then they break it, and they pass it to one another. And then they take the cup of wine and drink together. And that's a covenant. That's a household covenant. And he Melech blessed them from El Elyon, Most High, Elohim Most High, El Elyon in the Hebrew. And he pronounced this blessing. Blessed be Avram, the exalted father, by Elohim Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be Elohim Most High for putting your enemies into your clutches. And Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. Sounds like a church service, right? We have this meeting. We have this assembly. Abraham and Melchizedek. And Melchizedek brings bread and wine, a fellowship meal. This is what we would call an oneg. An oneg. We're not talking about Holy Communion. We're not talking about that. Although that is an oneg par excellence. The Pesach, Passover. And he brings this fellowship meal, and he pronounces a blessing on this man, Abraham. Remember, Melchizedek is a priest, a Cohen of El Elyon. And he blesses him. Baruch atah. There's a blessing on you, Abraham. Baruch atah, Abraham. From El Elyon. And then, Melchizedek didn't take an offering. He didn't call his offering, guys. All of a sudden, from his heart, Avram gives him a tenth of everything. Not just a tenth of this, but a tenth of everything. The word tithe means a tenth, and he gives him a tenth of everything. Go with me to chapter 15 of Breshit, and I only got a few minutes here, 10 or so minutes. Let's see if I could. Chapter 15 is a divine promise and covenant. We see there in verse 1, it happened sometime later that the word of Yahweh, Davar HaYahweh, the word there is Davar HaYahweh. Whenever it says Davar HaYahweh, the word of Yahweh, we're talking about Yeshua. Because John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. And Arche en hologos, the word hologos, the word, kai hologos en prostonteon, kai hologos theos. He was Elohim. But in the Hebrew, Breshit chaya chadavar. In the Hebrew, it says, in the beginning was the word, Breshit chaya chadavar. V'chadavar chaya Elohim. Va Elohim chadavar. The word of Elohim, the chadavar, comes to Abraham in a vision. Have no fear, Avram. I am your shield. I am your magen. The magen Abraham. Your reward shall be great. Yeshua says, Adoni Yahweh. Adoni Yahweh. In the Hebrew, it's the word Adon and Yorhe Vavhe Yahweh. Now your English might translate it Lord God, because they can't say Lord, Lord, because of, that's another story. Abraham replied, what do you intend to give me? I go childless. Remember, Adonai promised him a child. Then Abraham said, see, you have given me no descendants. Some man of my household may be my heir. Then the word of Yahweh, Yahweh was spoken to him. He shall not be your heir. Your heir shall be of your own flesh and blood. Then taking him outside, he said, look up to heaven and count the stars, if you can. Such will be your descendants. Again, plural here. He told him, Avram put his faith in Yahweh, who counted this as making him justified. Again, not only with Lech LechaGo, now again he puts his faith in Abraham, in Adonai, and Adonai considers it as righteousness. I am Yahweh, he said, who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to make you heir of this land. Adonai Yahweh, Abraham, how am I to know that I shall inherit it? Get me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. He brought them. He cut them in half. He put half on one side and half on facing the other. But the birds he did not cut. Birds of prey came down on carcasses, but Abraham drove them off. All of a sudden, Adonai is going to make a covenant. This is how you make a covenant. In Hebrew, it's cut a covenant. A covenant is not made on paper. It's cut. And the victims, the blood that is shed, is the covenant. Like the first covenant that Adonai made with with Adam. When Adonai cut a covenant with Adam, and Adonai killed the first lamb. And with the first lamb that he killed, the blood that was shed, innocent blood, the sacrifice of that innocent blood, the guilt and shame of Abraham was taken away by the clothing of that lamb that was sacrificed. Here we have the heifer killed, cut in half, and Abraham is to walk between them. When he walks between them, blood is on his feet. Blood is on his skirt. And he's bloodied. In other words, what Abraham is saying, when you do covenant, you would cut the animals in half, and party of the first part would walk between it. And he would say, may this happen to me and more if I break the covenant. And then the party of the second part walks between it. And then he says, may this happen to me and more if I break the covenant. But this is a unilateral covenant. All of a sudden, we find there in verse 12 that as soon as Abraham does this, he falls asleep. He goes into a sleep by Adonai, by the way. And terror, awesomeness comes to him. Then Yahweh said to Abraham, now remember, Abraham was asleep, and Adonai is talking to him in his sleep. Know this for certain. Your descendants, your seed, plural, will be exiled in a land not of their own, Egypt, where they will be slaves and oppressed for 400 years. But I will pass judgment on the nation that enslaves them, and after that they will leave with many possessions. Remember the possessions of Egypt. For your part, you shall go to your fathers in Shalom, and you will be buried at a ripe old age. In the 4th generation they shall come back here, for the wickedness of the Amorites has ended. And when the sun had set, and it was dark, there appeared a smoking firepot and a flaming torch between the animal pieces. Under here I have a fire pot. There's my fire pot. It's a replica fire pot of the fire pots that are used in Israel even today. And the fire pot is the symbol of the Father. And when the son is married, the father gets some embers from the fire pot and puts them in the new fire pot for his son. And that fire pot must always, it's like the pilot light in your home. It is the father's, husband's responsibility to keep that fire pot going. And he passes embers to his son and to his son. Sometimes generations go with the embers not turning off. This is again, an earthly, if some of you men could understand this, an earthly way of explaining the seed coming down from father to son, father to son, father to son, father to son, down the line. And it's the symbol of Yahweh our Father. And a fire pot appears in the dark. Abraham is asleep. But all of a sudden, there's a torch, there's a firebrand that appears. And watch what it says. That went between the two halves. That day, Yahweh, which is a singular noun, Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham with these terms. To your seed, singular, I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. And so Adonai made a covenant with Abraham and his seed for the land. Remember, that seed is Yeshua, Messiah. While Abraham was asleep. Who were the two? It was Yahweh, the part of the first part, and it was Abraham, the party of the second part, but he was asleep. So a firebrand, a torch, took his place. We're talking about the Father and the Word, Yeshua here. Yeshua stood in, was a substitute for Abraham. If the party of the first part breaks it, he's liable. If the party of the second part breaks it, he's liable. Adonai is not a man that he should lie. He will keep his covenant. But Abraham, because he's a man, will break his covenant. But when Abraham, who breaks his covenant, messes up, guess what? Someone took his place. That firebrand took his place. It's unilateral with Abraham, but it's bilateral because now we have someone's going to take his place. Someone's taken our place. We've all messed up, and someone takes our place. Ay, ay, ay. Oh, we could talk about Abraham, El Shaddai. Oh, the name change is so important. We can't, I just lost time. Circumcision, the olive tree prophecy. I have another hour to go. Well, let's just go ahead and close here. Let's stand. There's so much in your word, Adonai. But today's study is of vital importance for everyone that wants to follow Torah. Because we must know that we must be Mosaic. I must be a Mosaic follower. But I must be a Messianic follower. But I must be an apostolic follower. I can't be rabbinic. I can't be Christian. I have to be biblical. Allow us, Father, to search the scriptures to see if these things be so. Yeverechecha Yahweh vayishmerecha, yir Yahweh panav elecha vichunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha, vayasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or TorahUnleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en TorahUnleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.